اتأخرت بس لأنه كل الناس بتطلع بنفس الوقت طلعت. كانت كل عام وانتم بخير. إن شاء الله إنه يكون رمضان مبارك لكم جميعا وأعانكم الله للصيام والقيام. نتابع الأمراض الخاصة بالكاتلز، وهذا مرض بتاع كاتل باستحقاق. We didn't see it in other animals, solely in cattle. Lumpy skin disease. We have different names for it. Okay. You can look it over, but the name that widely used is lumpy skin disease, LSD. All right. And I want you to remember the needling virus, because needling virus is actually the strain that is so far used as a vaccine, highly used as a vaccine. But there are other strains that are used as vaccines. Some of them are homologous vaccines and heterologous vaccines. All right? The LSD virus belongs to the OXBD viruses, which the genus of this family is the Capri virus, and those Capri viruses are of a wide range, basically. Those are the same genus that causes sheep and goat pox. So sheep and goat pox are caused by the same genus of viruses, all right? The Capri viruses. And this fact led us to using actually sheep and goat pox vaccines for prevention of lumpy skin disease. Some countries are still using sheep and goat pox to prevent LSD. Jordan, for example, it's not allowed to use the needling virus in Jordan, but it is allowed to use the heterologous, which is sheep and goat pox virus, against it. And it's particularly a sheep virus that they use. It belongs to the family RM65 strain. This, so already you mentioned this. Usually, it cannot be really those different Capri boxes. We can differentiate them using the typical serological test, which means in a country where there is sheep and goat pox, it's really difficult, basically, to rely on only serology as the tool to do screening for LSD. Because actually, in most situations, especially in villages, usually those that have cows, they have goats and sheep. So they practice mixed farming. And those that practice mixed farming, basically, will result in the virus of the sheep and goat, basically, entering the host of cattle and vice versa. And then creating a problem in serological diagnosis, or actually a problem in conclusions. Okay? So you have to take into consideration that serology is not the tool to confirm infection, but it is still a tool for what? For surveillance, for monitoring. Okay? Yani always we have diagnostic tests that we use for surveillance or clearance or screening. And we have another diagnostic test that we use for confirmation of infection. So serology is not the best method to test for confirmation of infection unless, first of all, you don't have sheep and goat pox and you don't practice vaccination. Because vaccination affects the serological test. So there's no DIVA. You remember last week or the week before, I told you about DIVA, which is the capability of the test to differentiate between infected and vaccinated. Okay? This is a very important disease because, first of all, it's a transbounded animal disease, which means it affects, again, now, always remember, the word transbounded animal disease, I don't mean that the virus cross borders, okay, cross borders, but actually the importance of this word, or this basic statement, transbounded animal disease, it means that it affects trading. So you can trade animals if they have LSD. And if you report that LSD, countries will start banning you from basically exporting livestock or livestock products. Right? So the first description of this virus was in southern part and eastern parts of Africa. It was in 1929. Okay? It was only in cattle, but then it spread to other, but within the same family of cattle. All right? And eventually, basically, the virus, again, as I told you, can replicate in sheep and goat, but the needling virus itself will not cause disease in sheep and goat. Similarly, the sheep and goat pox virus will not cause disease in cattle, but they will affect serological testing. And they can produce immunity. So, why it's important? Because it causes losses. What type of losses? We have losses that can see directly on the animal, like the severe emaciation, the drop in milk yield. Usually, animals cease to milk, or actually the reduction varies between 10% to 50% to 60%. That's a huge loss when the cow is a high producer. Okay? Abortion, and the abortion here is due to the fever that usually starts the clinical picture. And where the lesions are could result in secondary infections. If they are in the teats, because usually you will see lesions in the teats, this will result in mastitis eventually, loss of fertility, and of course, the extensive damage to the skin, the hides, all right? And basically, the animals lose the power to walk, showing signs of lameness and so on. The disease basically has very descriptive or distinct morbidity and mortality. So the morbidity varies from 3% to 85%, and it depends on the geographical location, as I told you. So practicing mixed farming in a country where sheep and pox disease exists actually produce protection, as I told you, because the virus of sheep and goat pox will be circulating and will be entering the cows, and the cows will develop immunity and eventually will not show clinical signs. And it will be like natural vaccination for them. That's why the wide range of morbidity from 3% to 85%. This disease is not a fatal disease. It doesn't cause death in animals, all right? It causes emaciation, it causes milk cessation, it causes the lesions and so on, but not mortality. So the mortality is very low. Sometimes you don't see it at all. All right? So this can't be seen in our region. Okay? And especially on the current genus that is circulating. A new genus of LSD virus is currently circulating in Europe and South Asia. And we called it the new virulent LSD virus. New virulent LSD virus. And this new variant LSD virus, basically, it seems to be that it's a combination of different viruses. And we believe that it's created by the wrongful use of vaccination. Because they start using different types of vaccines in the same region, plus they start importing vaccines from, poor sources. Usually the vaccine was contaminated by other types of carrier boxes, and this results in the formation of a new variant of LSD virus in Europe, South Europe, Eastern Europe, as well as certain part of Asia, creating this new variant, which we believe that it causes mortalities that can reach to 50% or 85%, but not in this region. Okay? Of course, this is a vector-borne disease. So mosquitoes are very important for transmission of the virus. Mosquitoes and other blood-sucking insects. So this is, always remember that this is a vector-borne disease. The word vector-borne disease, I hope that you still remember what a vector-borne disease is. That is transported by a vector. The virus is carried by a vector. It's either biological or mechanical or physical. All right? So what is the difference between physical vector and mechanical vector? And I'm talking about live vectors, which is mosquitoes. Yeah. Correct. It means it can replicate inside the insect. Or it can be passed لإيش؟ الإجز تاعت الإنسكتس هذه. It will be passed to the second generation of insects or third generations. So it maintains the infection in basically the area. So, and this is why you have to remember that in case of lumpy skin disease, it's a biological vector, not just a mechanical vector for mosquitoes. All right? Other routes of transmission, direct contact. All right? So animals that are close to each other, eating from the same troughs, drinking from the same water troughs, eating some or touching some of the products from an animal that is infected, even if you are breeding animals infected from non-infected, because it is kind of like a venereal transmission that could happen, all these can result in infection. The virus can survive in a crust. A crust is the basically product of the lesion in the skin. After it's dried, it may fall on the ground, especially if animals start scratching walls and metal bars. They drop on the ground basically, so the virus stays there for more than 1 month. So actually we can submit those for virus basically identification, either for PCR or for culture. A good sign and a good characteristic of the virus, which aids in fast recovery from outbreak, that it does not produce carriers. You remember last lecture, I told you that FMD, one of the problems is the subclinically infected and the carriers. In case of LSD, there are no carriers. So in animals that are infected and healed, and cured, they represent no danger on others. All right? So they don't stay carriers for a long period of time. And that's why, so far, with the too many outbreaks that we faced, we were able to control it here in Jordan, okay? And quickly, basically by vaccination. Okay. So what are the clinical signs? The incubation period is between 5 and 1 month, 5 weeks max. But actually, our experience basically suggested that about 10 days is the max, the majority. But we have seen animals that needed 1 month to get infected. All right? And you know what is incubation period, right? Incubation period is, who can tell me? From what? Entry? Say it, yeah. So what is that pre-patent period? Pre-patent period. Your friend said that the incubation period is from virus entry to showing of the first clinical signs. What is pre-patent period? Pre-patent period.
Dormant stage?
Pre-patent period is from virus entry to shedding. So sometimes pre-patent period is shorter than incubation period, and sometimes it's longer than incubation period. Which is more difficult? If it's shorter or longer? Shorter. All right? So another good thing about this disease, that pre-patent period is similar or a little bit longer than incubation period. But for example, FMD, it is shorter. BVD, it is shorter. And that's actually one of the things that make it really very difficult for us to control BVD. In addition to persistently infected calves and so on, and we already covered it by, Dr. Summer. But actually, this is one of the things that created problems in controlling infectious diseases when the pre-patent period is shorter than the incubation period. Okay? And الحيوان you don't know if it's infected or not, and it's shedding because it doesn't show any clinical sign. لأنه متى الأونرز متى الناس بيجوا عليك وبيشتكوا لما يشوفوا clinical signs. مظبوط؟ معقول انت تروح دكتور تقول له دكتور انا بكره بدي اصير اكح واعطس؟ طيب you see that good number of animals will not show any clinical signs. Usually the signs are more seen in younger animals. So the first signs that you see are not the skin lesions. The name of the disease is lumpy skin disease. So you're expecting to see skin lesions so fast. But actually you see the fever first, or you feel it. So owners will be complaining of abortion initially because of the fever, really very high fever. They will complain of cease of feeding, basically. All right? Loss of appetite. And then the reduction of milk yield. They will initially think that it's maybe mastitis or other mucosal diseases. But then, after a few days, you start seeing the typical lesions for lumpy skin disease, which are the raised circular firm nodules that they come together sometimes to form plates. and they exist anywhere in the body. All right? They may get very hard, all right, to form what we say sit fast. And eventually they shed. And this is what I mean by sit fast here. And this is the period, the time where the scabs will be forming, the dry skin. And then you can remove it by fissures, or actually the animals scratch themselves with other animals, or on the walls, or the metal parts, they drop on the ground basically. And this is what we collect for pathology and for virus isolation and PCR. So this is the best to send to the laboratory, okay? And the way you look at it, actually, the way it comes out without cutting. So this guy here used the tweezers without using any scalpels or scissors. It comes off, okay? And usually it comes off after you do what? Twisting. And a lot of people actually resembles the scab with the skin, like, zar wal arwa, right? So, what else we see? As I said, because we see clinical signs like those heights, those nodules on other parts of the body, resulting in swollen tender udders and testicles. You may see those on tongue, gum, and hard palate lesions. And that's why it's a mucosal disease. It's part of the mucosal diseases that you need to differentiate from other mucosal diseases. And you will get abortion, sterility, and this is not a permanent one. As soon as the disease ceases, it becomes healthy. Post-mortem lesions, the skin nodules is very typical. The lesions in the mucous membranes throughout the gastrointestinal tract is typical. The nodules in the lung sometimes. And sometimes you see hemorrhages in spleen, liver, and rumen. But again, you can't miss the nodules in the skin. But there are other things that produce nodules in the skin, but not typical like those nodules that we see on lumpy skin disease. So you need to practice your eyes on some pictures, because we have actually another disease called pseudo lumpy skin disease. We have another disease that affects cattle, we call it cowpox. Cowpox is caused by a different disease, by the way. All right? And it's, pox, very deep, but it's a cowpox virus, which resembles a lot the human pox, the rubella, okay? And we have other diseases like, that cause nodules in the teeth that may be mistaken by some of you, we call it the mammalitis virus, right? Bovine mammalitis virus. And we have sometimes cow that show hypersensitivity to the sun. We call it photosensitization or hypersensitivity, which actually resembles the lesions that we see, but those lesions are smaller, all right? And basically they don't form the scabs that we see or the plaques that we see in case of lumpy skin disease. So diagnosis, we depend on the clinical picture. So this sit fast is very pathognomonic for the lumpy skin disease. When we say pathognomonic, means that it's a characteristic, pathological characteristic that we see or results from virus or bacterial infection. This is a specific one, sorry. So we say this is a pathognomonic for this disease. It means that you don't see it in other diseases. All right? Laboratory test will really depend on virus isolation and identification. Now we have the PCR that can help us immensely. Of course, electron microscopy, but nobody now practices this, but for research purposes. Serology, as I told you, we have a problem with serology because it cross-reacts with other Capri boxes. So in area where you have sheep and goat pox, serology might be useless. It could give you indications, but it's useless. So how we prevent this disease? It depends whether you are in an endemic area or non-endemic area. In non-endemic area, you have to practice high biosecurity in both actually. But then you have to prevent importation of animals from countries where the disease is reported. Not just the animals, but the semen and other products that enters the livestock production cycle. In addition to that, you have to practice eradication whenever you see cases, and practice ring vaccination and eventually eradication of those that you vaccinated after the outbreak is over. But in endemic areas, we practice vaccination. All right? Of course, insect control. So, as I said, in 3 areas. So, quarantine is very important. Slaughtering infected animals. Quarantine is the same as zoning. You quarantine the area where the outbreak were identified. You use a lot of cleaning and disinfection. Cleaning and disinfection and restriction, right? Cleaning, disinfection, and restriction. Those 3 things, clean, disinfect, restrict. Actually, those are the 3 pillars of biosecurity systems. If you want to create a good biosecurity system in an area or a farm or a country or a geographical location, whatever, you have to practice restriction, means restriction of access and restriction of bringing anything without testing, restriction of public entrance, restriction of many things that could bring the infection to your house. Cleaning means that you have to practice cleaning in all the practices that you do, cleaning of the shoes and materials used for production, cleaning of the areas where the disease were identified, or regardless whether you move animal from one area to another, and disinfection, which is the regular use of disinfectants in order to kill whatever viruses, bacteria that you are in danger of. So this is in an area where it's free, then you consider the ring vaccination, as I said. So you quarantine the area where the disease was identified, and then you practice vaccination, zonal vaccination or ring vaccination, which is you vaccinate around that area, healthy animals. And eventually you have to get rid of those animals. You are giving a period, a grace period to get rid of those in due time. All right? So in endemic areas, we use vaccines. It's been very useful, vaccines. And because the cross-reactivity between different strains of capripoxes, you can use heterologous vaccines and homologous vaccines. What is heterologous vaccines? When I say heterologous vaccines, it means what?
Different strains.
different strain from the original strain that caused the disease. So this is not an LSD virus, but it's a sheep virus, or a goat virus, or a sheep and goat virus. Right? The most heterologous vaccine that was used, and still actually used by many countries, is the sheeppox RM65 strain. Another strain that is widely used is the 024. Some countries, they use Gorgon strain of goatpox. And actually the Gorgon strain is a very good strain to control LSD because it has high efficacy as well as it causes very, very little side reactions. Because one of the problems ماشي؟ Gorgon strain is a very good strain for control of LSD. Okay? It doesn't cause the common side effects that we see with the homologous strains. Because homologous treatments or use of needling virus as a vaccine can produce or can result in some side reactions. It may actually cause skin lesions and it may cause reduction in milk yield. تفضل.
بس أول اثنين
RM65
والثاني ايش اسمه؟
024 ما يعني ما راح اسالكم عنهم هذول بس انه احفظوا انه في شيء اسمه هيتيرولوجس وفي شيء اسمه هومولوجس بس الهومولوجس بدي اياك تحفظوه اهم لقاح هومولوجس هو نيتلينج شو اسمه قلت لكم المرض اسمه نيتلينج ديزيز نيتلينج سترين هاي strain first characterized in South Africa right and it's been taken by the reference laboratory in South Africa, Indrosport, okay? And that laboratory developed this strain by passing it multiple times, about 32 or 35 times, they weakened it. لأنه كل الفاكسينز اللي احنا بنحكي عنه هون مش زي الفاكسين هذا ايش هو modified live vaccine. attenuated strains. يعني live virus. احنا we are using live virus. ماشي؟ والتiter is very important how much titer you should put. The recommendation if you are using heterologous vaccine you have to use 10 times the regular titer for sheep and goat. Usually the titer for sheep and goat is 3.5. The recommendation is to use 10 times. So it's 10 to the power 4.5. Okay? عارفين شو التايتر اللوك 10 تايتر. Now for needling you don't have to use the high titer because it's a homologous vaccine. All right? حكيت لكم عن الجورجن سترين قلت لكم is a new this is a capribox vaccine. الجورجن هاي is a capribox vaccine. It produces very little side effects and very good immunity. هون الاميونيتي اللي بندور عليها هقول لكم في immunity. Are we looking for neutralizing antibodies? ولا cell mediated immunity؟ مين بيحكي antibodies؟ كم في عندنا type of immunity usually like immunity المناعة ايش؟ شباب هذا بس vaccination active vaccination مناعة response immune response similar لكن قبلها في عندنا specific و non specific primary and secondary ماشي So the primary one is what? Is actually some of it specific and some of it non-specific. Okay? And this is where the body is primed with this energy. So the virus is taken, or the bacteria is taken by cells, most of the time by cells, neutrophils mostly, which actually, as soon as they take the virus or the bacteria, they become what? Antigen presenting cells, right? Antigen presenting cells. They take it, they digest it, they spread it, or they surface for other cells to come and work with it, right? So in case of humoral responses, we have Th1, and then we have interleukins associated with this, which is actually T cells that comes and get what? Get basically developed to become a mast cell, right? And start producing antibodies. And this is actually, we call it secondary humoral immune response. Because the primary one is non-specific. It's protected, but non-specific. Correct? So these are the things that we do. So the cell, the immunity that we are looking for, in case of LSD, is what? Is a cell-mediated immunity. That's why when you are producing a vaccine or when you are producing a vaccine, antibodies, yeah, maybe antibodies helps as a neutralizing, if those are neutralizing antibodies. Because some antibodies are not neutralizing. Not all antibodies produced are neutralizing, right? Okay? So, the needling strain is the most widely used, and we believe it's actually the strain that should be used, especially in areas where sheep and goat pox is not present. All right? In our area, in our region, we have sheep and goat pox, and that's why some countries, they are still using the heterologous vaccine, which is the sheep and goat pox vaccine. It's either sheep pox vaccine or sheep and goat pox vaccine or capri pox vaccine, which is the goat pox vaccine. اوكي اللي هم ايش؟ قلنا ارام 65 منهم 024 Gorgon strain and so on. But in areas where the disease sheep and goat pox does not exist, the recommendation is to use the needling strain. Although needling strain is a very strong strain and produces side effects like sometimes skin lesions and sometimes reduction in milk, noticeable reduction in milk yield. So owners does not like this because at the end of the day, you want a producing cow. You are dealing with a producing cow, all right? Pigata. Okay, so. And even actually the lesions that are sometimes produced, the skin lesions after vaccination, those disappears in a few days. And usually they do not develop to become plaques and set faces, as we see with infection, with the wild virus. عندكم أسئلة على اللمب سكين ديزيز؟
هلا اللمب سكين ديزيز هو سبيشيز هو أصل الكاو يعني فيروس أصل الكاو ما اسمه فيروس
لا يعني انه انت تحكي مع الجمهور. انا سامع ولا ما سمعت؟ سمعت هو الثلاث كلمات. على الصوت.
بس كنت اسال اذا هو سبيشيز سبيسيفيك ولا لا، هو سبيشيز سبيسيفيك بس نفس الوقت بالمحاضره انت حكيت عن دوران الاوبان هم يعملوا فانا بوضح
Causing a disease is something different from causing infection. يعني يمكن واحد شو Yeah. So the virus may infect the cells and start producing antibodies, start producing immunity, but it doesn't cause disease. So lumpy skin disease for sheep and goat is like this, and goat and sheep pox is like this for cattle. So the virus itself infects the cells, infects the cattle cells, all right? And the cattle that get sheep and goat pox, whether it's a sheep pox or goat pox or sheep and goat pox, they start producing antibodies and immune reactions, but they don't produce disease. This is what I mean. I don't mean that whether it's infecting the cells or for example, the cattle cells or not, but it does not produce disease.
Yeah, how do we feed the vaccination?
So lumpy skin disease is actually a species-specific, like for cattle as a disease. So you don't see lumpy skin disease on sheep and goat. You may see it in some wild animals, but not in sheep and goat. But they will produce antibodies. So they will produce immunity and they will produce antibodies. But this does not mean infection. Disease. Right?
أنا فهمت. هلا هذا الشيء بفيد بالvaccination.
Yeah. We feed the vaccination because it cross acts. So we can benefit from. This is number one. Number two, it actually affects surveillance and monitoring. And it affects countries' programs that لما أنا بدي أعلن إنه أنا free of مثلا الأردن we don't practice LSD vaccination. We only had 2 outbreaks and we were able to control it by internal vaccines. I'm talking about Jordan. We never reported LSD for the last 15 years, by the way. Okay? And we don't practice vaccination. But if we do serology, we will get serological reactions. So if we prepare our dossier to apply to the WOH, which is the OIE, formerly known as OIE, to become free of this disease, we can't prove that we are free serologically. We have to do other things to prove that we are free. In Europe, it's different because they don't have LSD, they don't have sheep and goat pox. They can easily do serology, and then serology is very valuable for them, not for us. All right? For example, the story is different in Egypt. Egypt is they experience LSD very frequently. So, but for us, although we don't have LSD, but we still can't basically report that we are free. We have to find other ways to report that we are free. You got me? في كمان أسئلة؟ طيب احنا رمضان ساعة بس خلصنا المحاضرة الساعة 10. Do you have any questions? I was planning to give you another disease. If I don't get to give it to you, the disease, next time, still, you are required to read about it. It will be in the exam. مش كل الأمراض رح نحكيها في أمراض أحط لك إياها. It will be in the exam. It's your responsibility to read about it and ask me about it later. Okay? مين ممثلة لأنه أنا بعتي لي مسج. طيب. See you next week. Unless you have questions.